I called off my wedding after my fiance allowed children but banned my daughter, blaming her for ruining our engagement party by being sick. Addison 40 degrees Fahrenheit and I 38 degrees Fahrenheit were about to tie the knot, but I abruptly called it off. For the past 3 years, we had been together, and everything seemed to be going well. However, 6 months ago, after we got engaged, things started to unravel when we began discussing the wedding guest list. Naturally, I wanted my daughter, Emma, to be present. She's 14 years old, not a young child, but Addison was adamant that no children should attend the wedding. This was surprising given that Addison has 2 children from a previous marriage and is close to her 6 nieces and nephews. Many of our invited guests were also parents. I couldn't understand her reasoning, but we argued about it repeatedly. Eventually, I grudgingly agreed to keep Emma away from the wedding, provided no children from Addison's side of the family were invited either. Addison insisted that she wanted a stress-free wedding and claimed that making exceptions would upset other guests with children. She reassured me that she loved Emma and her own kids but stood firm on her decision. Though I was angry, I reasoned there was little I could do. Addison was determined to have a wedding without kids. The wedding was meant to be a small gathering in my parents' backyard in Charlotte, North Carolina, with only close friends and family. I convinced myself that the kids wouldn't be missing out on much fun and decided to let it go. Just a few days before the wedding, everything changed. While I was at work, Addison's younger sister, Kate, accidentally emailed our shared wedding account, a mistake that revealed Addison's true intentions. The email included pictures of Kate's 2 daughters wearing wedding-appropriate dresses. I was confused at first, thinking it must be a mix-up. But I quickly realized that Kate had sent the email to the wrong address. I took a screenshot of the email before Addison deleted it minutes later. It was clear she had been trying to cover her tracks. Addison had claimed the wedding would be child-free, but in reality, she planned to invite her own children and her nieces and nephews while banning Emma. I was furious at her dishonesty but decided to keep quiet for the moment. When I got home from work, I acted as though nothing had happened. Addison seemed nervous, likely wondering if I had seen the email. But when I didn't mention it, she relaxed and returned to her usual behavior. I, however, couldn't shake the anger and betrayal I felt. 2 days before the wedding, I decided to talk to Emma about Addison. I had asked her about this before proposing to Addison, but with the wedding approaching and my doubts growing, I needed to revisit the topic. In hindsight, I'm glad I did. Emma told me that Addison had been kind to her before the engagement, but things changed afterward. Addison acted cold and dismissive when I wasn't around. Emma hadn't mentioned it earlier because she didn't want to ruin my happiness, but she admitted that Addison's behavior made her feel unwelcome. Emma said she didn't feel like Addison wanted her in our lives anymore. Learning that she wasn't invited to the wedding only confirmed her fears. She said she had already decided not to attend because she didn't think it mattered. Hearing this broke my heart. I felt terrible for letting Addison convince me to exclude my daughter. I made the decision then and there to call off the wedding. The day before the ceremony, I confronted Addison about her behavior. After that, I didn't return home. Addison called me repeatedly, but I ignored her. I stayed with Emma all day instead. Spending time with her reminded me of what was truly important, and by the end of the day, we both felt better. That night, I stayed at a hotel after dropping Emma off at her mother's house. The next morning, I arrived at my parents' house an hour before the ceremony was set to begin. To my shock, many of Addison's family members were already there, including her dad, her sisters Kate and Amelia, and all 6 of their children. Addison's 2 kids, both under 12, were also running around. Addison rushed to meet me at the door. She immediately began explaining why her sisters couldn't leave their kids behind, despite the no children rule. She also claimed that her parents felt it would be strange for her to get married without her own kids present. I stayed silent, listening to her excuses. When she finished, she began asking me strange questions like where I had been the night before and why I was dressed the way I was. In response, I pulled out my phone and showed her the screenshot of Kate's email. I laughed in her face, and that was enough to silence her. She realized she had been caught and couldn't talk her way out of it. Addison started apologizing, but it was too late. I told her I had spent the previous day with Emma and had discovered how she had been treating my daughter. Addison had been treating my daughter differently for months, ever since we got engaged. At that moment, I didn't even want an explanation or an answer. I told her plainly that we were done. It was clear she didn't value Emma, and for me, that was non-negotiable. I'd never treated Addison's children any differently than my own, so this realization was painful. But it also made one thing clear: marrying her would be a mistake. I didn't wait for her to respond. I just left. Even as Addison called after me, I didn't turn around. With nothing else to do, I got in my car, drove to a hotel, and crashed. I slept for hours. By the time I woke up at lunchtime, my phone was flooded with messages. Addison's family was furious, and the wedding guests were confused. I couldn't bring myself to care. I gave a quick explanation to my friends and family, then put my phone away. Later, I went to visit Emma. I explained everything to her, that I had cancelled the wedding because she was my priority. I apologized for letting things slip over the past few months. Without even realizing it, Addison's behavior had driven a wedge between us. Emma used to come to me immediately if she had a problem, but lately, she hadn't said a word. That was a clear sign something was wrong. At least now we had worked things out, even if the conversation was emotional for both of us. As for Addison, that's where things have been complicated. It's been 5 days since the wedding was supposed to happen, and by now, almost everyone knows why I called it off. Addison's dishonesty was just as much of a deal-breaker as her treatment of Emma. In my opinion, dishonesty is a red line in any relationship. I've been cheated on twice, and I know firsthand that it always starts with small lies. Addison thought she could get away with such a blatant deception, and that was unacceptable. I don't feel like I was wrong to cancel the wedding. Yes, it was abrupt and might seem harsh, but considering she was going to spring this on me at the last minute, it felt justified. Addison's family thinks I was unfair and that I should have given her a chance to explain herself. Addison herself has been blowing up my phone, as have her relatives. She keeps insisting she had valid reasons for excluding Emma and that I should have spoken to her before making such a big decision. She's even suggested that my refusal to talk was more hurtful than her actions. Her argument doesn't hold water to me. To my knowledge, there's never been any real issue between Addison and Emma. I can't fathom what her reasoning could be, and honestly, I don't care anymore. Still, I've been feeling some guilt these past few days. I keep thinking I should have confronted her sooner. Instead of pretending everything was fine until the last minute, I should have gone home the day I saw that email and talked it out. I might have prevented a lot of the drama if I'd handled it differently, but at the time, I didn't see another way. Now I'm left wondering if I was a jerk for not giving Addison a chance to explain. 3 days ago, I made a decision that feels right but is still difficult. I texted Addison to let her know she needs to move out of my house, which I owned before we got together. It feels fair to give her until the end of the month to find a new place. I'll stay with a friend until then because hotel living isn't practical for much longer. Despite everything, I feel more confident about my choice. My friends have reassured me that I made the right call by prioritizing Emma. I don't think I owe anyone an apology for putting my daughter first. If someone has a problem with that, they can keep their distance. I'm fine with it. Addison hasn't explained her motivations, and I've realized I don't want to hear them. Her parents and sisters clearly knew what she was planning and said nothing. That hurts more than I expected because I thought I was part of their family. When Addison finally messaged me last night, I responded briefly. I told her to start looking for a place and that if she wanted to explain herself, she could text me. I made it clear there was no going back. What's done is done. As of now, she hasn't replied. Emma and I have talked a lot about everything, but even she doesn't understand why Addison changed so much after our engagement. Emma told me she tried to bridge the gap early on, but Addison ignored her efforts. Based on what I've heard, Addison is the problem here. I've thought a lot about the dynamics at play. Emma isn't one of those kids who struggles with their parents moving on. Her mother and I split up when she was 3. We only dated for 2 years, and she hardly remembers us together. Her mom has been remarried for 5 years, and Emma gets along well with her stepdad.
Emma never expressed any discomfort about me dating Addison.
In fact, they got along well before we got engaged. That makes this situation all the more confusing.
I know Emma doesn't lie, especially not about something like this.
She knows how much I value honesty, so I believe her when she says Addison changed.
The more I think about it, the clearer it becomes, Addison was the issue.
Whether it was insecurity or something else, she sabotaged the relationship. I'll admit it stings, but I'm relieved. If this had gone unnoticed, it would have caused more problems down the road. I value openness and truthfulness in my loved ones.
When Emma claimed Addison had started acting differently, I believed her without question.
Still, I doubted Addison would reveal her real motivations. A few hours ago, I texted her, but she hasn't responded. Since she works from home and is always on her phone for her job, it's unlikely she missed the message.
She's definitely ignoring me. It doesn't matter. All I want now is for her to move out so I can get back to my life.
I'm staying in a motel, which feels strange, and I'll have to return to work soon.
Second update. 3 days have passed since I texted Addison, and she finally responded earlier today. She claimed she understood why I didn't want to meet her face to face but insisted we should. She wanted to explain why she didn't want Emma at the wedding. She said she didn't want me to misinterpret her actions, that her reasons were legitimate, and that she wasn't trying to be the villain. Her reasoning? She didn't want to hurt me, so she lied. I found that absurd.
She caused pain anyway. I replied within half an hour, making it clear I wouldn't meet her in person. If she had anything to say, she could do so via text. That was the end of it, for me, at least. An hour later, she messaged again. She claimed the reason she didn't want Emma at the wedding was something that happened at the engagement party. On that day, Emma hadn't been feeling well. It was my turn to have her for the month, and I knew she wasn't up to joining the celebration.
Still, Emma wanted to be there.
I told her she could rest upstairs if she needed to, but she insisted on being part of the festivities.
After a short time downstairs, toasting with the family, she went back upstairs to relax.
Some people asked about her well-being, but it wasn't a big disruption. Addison went upstairs later to check on her and found Emma talking and laughing on the phone with a friend.
According to Addison, Emma didn't appear sick at all.
Instead of talking to me or Emma, Addison vented her concerns to her sisters. After the engagement party, she distanced herself from Emma, letting a small misunderstanding spiral into something bigger. Addison convinced herself that Emma didn't support our marriage and would cause problems at the wedding.
That single incident became the basis of her decision to exclude Emma. When Addison told me all this, I was appalled. I didn't even bother replying. Instead, I spoke to Emma. She admitted she was still feeling unwell during the engagement party but had been chatting with a friend to distract herself. It didn't mean she wasn't sick, it was just her way of coping. Addison's logic was completely irrational. This episode gave her an excuse to stop pretending to be kind to Emma.
Reflecting on it, I believe Addison might have been insecure about my relationship with Emma from the start.
Looking back, I'm relieved I didn't marry Addison. She would have caused more issues down the line. There were warning signs even before this.
Addison often commented that I didn't spend enough time with her, even though I never complained about the time she spent with her own kids.
Ironically, Addison was the main reason I'd spent less time with Emma. She quietly absorbed all my attention, both mentally and practically.
I was so committed to the relationship that I didn't notice the imbalance until it was too late.
Now, I'm just grateful I ended things when I did. I wasn't willing to sacrifice my relationship with my daughter for anyone. Still, I can't wrap my head around Addison's message.
Destroying our relationship over something so trivial, a misunderstanding that could have been cleared up with a simple conversation, baffles me. For a while, I considered replying and telling her how I felt, but I decided it wasn't worth the trouble. For now, I'm choosing to ignore her messages until I absolutely need to engage, like when I go back to the house to get my work clothes. That might be soon, though, since I can't stay at my friend's or in a motel indefinitely. I hope Addison finds a new place soon so I can return home.
Update 3. I made my last update 2 days ago. Today, I returned home to grab my clothes and other necessities.
Staying in the motel was getting too expensive, so I planned to stay with a friend. I wasn't sure if Addison would be home, as I blocked her on most platforms and haven't replied to her recent messages.
Unfortunately, she was there when I arrived in the afternoon. She looked upset, clearly wanting to talk. I started gathering my belongings as quickly as possible, trying to avoid conversation. Addison followed me around, apologizing profusely.
She admitted she shouldn't have lied or blown the engagement party incident out of proportion. She said she felt awful about what happened and regretted listening to her sisters, who had convinced her the situation was more serious than it was. She pleaded for another chance, promising to rebuild her relationship with Emma and me. Her words made me feel a pang of sadness, but it was too late. When I reached my car, I told her I understood her feelings, but my daughter came first.
I couldn't stay with someone who didn't value Emma.
Addison was on the verge of tears as I said goodbye and reminded her to find a new place.
Then I got in my car and left.
It was much harder to see her in person than I expected. Part of me felt like a jerk for leaving that way, but I don't regret my decision.
It needed to be done.
For now, I'm staying with a friend, hoping Addison will move out soon so I can go back to my home. Rebuilding my life will take time, but one thing is certain: my relationship with Emma is stronger than ever. I worked as quickly as I could, grabbing my belongings and intending to get out before Addison could say too much. I told her, once again, to start looking for a place so I could move back in. As I made my way to the car, she followed me, apologizing profusely. Addison admitted she shouldn't have lied or made such a big deal out of the engagement party incident. She said she felt terrible about how things had unfolded and that she had recently fought with her sisters after realizing their advice had played a major role in the breakdown of our relationship. According to her, they had exaggerated the situation, making it seem like a much bigger issue than it really was. She pleaded for another chance, promising to improve her relationship with Emma and me if I gave her the opportunity. Hearing her made me feel a pang of sadness, but I knew it was too late. When I reached my car, I turned to Addison and told her I could understand how she felt, but my daughter came first.
As her father, it was my moral obligation to put Emma above all else. Addison looked like she was about to cry, but I didn't have the energy to deal with it.
I said a brief goodbye, reminded her to find another place to live, and drove off. Seeing her in person was far more difficult than texting her had been. Even though I felt a little guilty for leaving so abruptly, I don't regret it. It was the right thing to do. For now, I'm staying with a friend, hoping Addison will find somewhere to go in the next few weeks. Once she moves out, I can return home and start piecing my life back together, whatever normal will look like from now on. It will probably take time to move on, but there's a bright side to all this.
My relationship with Emma has never been stronger.
It feels like we've returned to the way things were before my engagement. There are no secrets between us anymore, she tells me everything again. Seeing her excitedly chat about her school day during our FaceTime call earlier today made all the recent challenges feel worth it. In a few weeks, we're heading to Myrtle Beach for a vacation.
I think we both need the break, so I've invited a few friends with kids Emma's age to join us.
While the past few weeks have been rough, I feel hopeful about the future.
Better days are ahead. Thank you for reading.
If you haven't already, please subscribe and hit the notification bell for more real-life stories that will shock, inspire, and remind you of the value of putting family first.